Now to Oman, where in the end, the talks between the US and Iran were both indirect, as the Iranians wanted, and direct, as the Americans preferred. This is, of course, the meeting at the weekend in Oman aimed at creating a new rapprochement over Iran's nuclear program after Donald Trump took the US out of the agreement during his first term. The latest talks were hosted by Oman. Its officials acted as intermediaries between the President Trump envoy, Steve Witkoff, and the Iranian Foreign Minister, Abbas Araghchi. The two principals sat in separate rooms, though their paths did cross briefly and they did exchange a few words, and they agreed to continue talking next week.
I think they're going okay.
What was your, what did Mr. Witkoff tell you about?
Because nothing matters until you get it done. So I don't like talking about it, but it's going okay. The Iran situation's going pretty good.
Are there other talks that are going well, sir?
I think.
Are there other talks that are going well in addition to the Iran talks?
There are other talks going well. I think Ukraine-Russia might be going okay, and you're going to be finding out pretty soon. You know, there's a point at which you just have to either put up or shut up, and we'll see what happens. But I think it's going fine.
تو این جلسه من فکر می‌کنم به مبنای مذاکراتی خیلی نزدیک.
During the meeting, I think we came very close to a basis for negotiations. At our next meeting, if we can finalize that basis, we will have gone a large part of the way. Neither we nor the other side want fruitless negotiations, discussions for discussion's sake, time wasting or talks that drag on forever. The American side also said that the desired agreement is the one that can be reached in the shortest possible time, but that it will not be easy and will require the necessary will from both sides. Next week, the second round will take place again, probably next Saturday, and at the next meeting, we will enter into the general frameworks that an agreement could have. The talks next Saturday will also be held at the same level, hosted by Oman, but the venue could be elsewhere.
Well, for his assessment of both the latest developments around Ukraine and the US-Iran talks, I'm joined now on the line from London by the international affairs analyst, Dr. Marek Laskiewicz. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Dr. Laskiewicz. Let's start with the situation in Ukraine. Following that series of Russian missile strikes on Sumy, it was the deadliest attack on civilians by Russia in Ukraine for 2 years. We heard President Zelensky there inviting Donald Trump personally to Ukraine to see for himself the realities, as he put it, of the Russian invasion. Do you think, do you expect President Trump to accept that invitation to turn up in Ukraine sometime soon?
No, I don't think it's going to come sometime soon. The point is that the devastation is quite visible on the television, and President Donald Trump is trying to steer a course here by which Russia will agree to the ceasefire. Going over to Ukraine would just put more pressure on Russia in the sense of confirming that the Americans suddenly are on Ukrainian side. So I don't think he'll come. He wants to steer a middle course.
Now, Mr. Trump has called the attack on Sumy a horrible thing, but he also suggested that Russia may have made a mistake and has not condemned Moscow. What do you make of that?
He's looking for a way out because, to be honest, if he accepts that this was a deliberate attack by Russia, then the problem is, the implication is that Russia is not going to go ahead with the ceasefire. President Donald Trump has put a lot of his political stock in attaining a ceasefire, so he's unwilling, obviously, to blacklist Russia straight away for this attack. So he's given them a loophole out, calling it a mistake. Please note, Moscow has said no such thing.
Indeed. Well, actually, just a few hours ago, officials in Moscow said the Russian military had been targeting a meeting of Ukrainian army commanders, and that it was Ukraine, according to Moscow, which was using civilians as human shields. What's your assessment of that?
To be quite honest, it's the same thing as we're seeing with Israel and Hamas. Whether it is true that there was a meeting to be held there, which I personally doubt, or whether it is not, the fact of the matter is that another missile has been used and many people have died, whether it is the Russian explanation or whether it was a deliberate attack on the civilians, we'll find out sometime later. Either way, it was an extremely unpleasant attack, but I certainly wouldn't believe what Russia says straight away. But please note, there is divergence here between the Russian and American explanations.
And how much do moments like this deadly attack on Sumy feel profoundly at odds with the ceasefire that the US is spearheading?
Yeah, it's not very conducive to optimism. However, there have been attacks by both sides, admittedly not blatantly on civilians like this, assuming, of course, that is what the Russians were doing. I think that the ceasefire will in any case take a long time to be agreed because Russia has very little to gain from it. There's almost certainly going to be straight away a EU force, a reassuring force, but they won't reassure the Russians. And it means that the moment they stop fighting, they're in for Ukraine being a full member of the West, full Western support, and therefore, what is in it for them to go ahead, except possibly some sort of commercial deal with Donald Trump? As a result, to be honest, I expect that the fighting will continue, albeit that the Russians may avoid hitting, obviously, civilian targets like this in the near future.
And finally, on Ukraine, before we switch gears, I mean, we understand that Russian forces are continuing to gather across the border to try and mount a major counter-offensive at some point this spring. That doesn't sound like Moscow is in any way deviating from its objective of taking as much of Ukraine as possible.
No, indeed. It's what I stated before about World War III. It's a nexus. It's very hard to avoid the war continuing and scaling up. Russia has everything to gain from the war continuing. And to be honest, it's hard to see why it should stop at this moment. If Donald Trump were to give very explicit commercial deals, offer them to the Russians, that might do it, possibly. But I doubt it. What is happening instead is, as you pointed out, Russia is carrying on because there's far more they can still gain. And as a result, I do not expect it to be a ceasefire in the immediate future. I do not believe Russia is serious about a ceasefire. The problem is, what does Donald Trump do then? Will he, as eventually another such civilian attack might well prompt him, go on Ukraine's side, in which case we have the escalation, or will he not do anything? And this is the problem with the smartphone tariffs, incidentally, whereupon he appears weak. And this is going to be a dilemma for him in the near future if Russia is to press on, and I believe Russia will press on. And so therefore Donald Trump will soon be coming to a very unpleasant decision point.
Well, let's turn to the US-Iran talks in Oman at the weekend. And I do appreciate your taking the time to talk to us. I know you're a very busy person, but of course your expert assessment is always appreciated. I mean, did the talks seem to have gone better than expected in your assessment? I mean, both sides are describing it as constructive and positive.
Well, first of all, they took place. That's already constructive and positive. Secondly, there was some exchange. The positions which were clear enough before have now been, so to speak, said indirectly, or rather directly, hopefully soon, between them. But that's not the really key point. Iran has consulted Russia about these talks. Now, that is one of the key, if you like, hidden aspects of the whole deal. There are two hidden aspects. First of all, Iran is Russia's ally. Now, if Iran were to drop out, as in effect America would achieve by means of this deal, Russia would be weakened, but simultaneously, Iran would cease to be a player of note, and it would more or less have lost. Now, simultaneously, it's the same thing for the Gazans, who haven't been consulted, of course, but equally, were Iran to be neutralized by the Americans, one of their key allies would go out. So therefore, there's more at stake than meets the eye, the whole business of picking on Iran now by Donald Trump is a very good move by him, very astute, because by neutralizing a key player in the Middle East, he'll give Israel a free hand in Gaza and simultaneously weaken Russia. So in this respect, what was interesting was that Iran has also consulted Moscow since those talks, and that therefore it is well aware of these extra, if you like, outside issues which are so important. What is important about that is that there are going to be more talks soon, but therefore it is quite clear it is a world affair and not a purely American-Iranian one.
That's very interesting. And from what I understand, there are actually two components to these talks. The first one is political and requires goodwill, which is the will to actually resolve this standoff. Then there's the more challenging one, which is the detail, of what a deal would actually look like. That would be much more technical and challenging, wouldn't it? But at this stage, it would seem that politically they've made progress.
Yes, in sense of goodwill and wanting to talk, there's some progress made, albeit that Donald Trump brought them to the table by threatening them. That's what it boils down to. However, as for the details, that's a difficult one. You see, there's a complete divergence here. What America wants is a neutralized Iran. No nukes, no nuclear power, just a nation somewhere out there, and so therefore they can get on with Russia. That is to say, America can get on with Russia and Israel can get on with Gaza. What Iran sees is its humbling here, a humiliation, and that's what obviously it was trying to avoid, but simultaneously it is being threatened by America, both indirectly via sanctions, which are really crippling its economy, and directly by means of military threats. And so when we come to the detail, they're going to be very difficult because basically Iran doesn't want to go down that route that America wants it to go. So the real question is, how far is it prepared to go? How far is America prepared to let it go before it accepts the deal? And then comes the key problem. How is the deal going to be monitored? Please note, according to all reports, Iran has been stockpiling near weapons grade nuclear material. And therefore, what does it mean when they say they're going to dismantle the nuclear program if in covert ways they might well be able to carry it on? Hence, Netanyahu said that the facilities have to be bombed. All in all, as you say, when it comes to the nitty-gritty of the negotiations themselves, the detail, there's a long way to go. It's very hard to see or predict right now which way it's going to turn out.
But I mean, could it be said that they do have a framework of an agreement with the JCPOA from 2015? I mean, and that is a roadmap of what it could look like to curb Iran's nuclear program. But the challenge would be for this new one to look like it delivered more than the JCPOA deal under President Obama in 2015.
Well, that's right. And we can even go a step further. The 2015 can scarcely be a roadmap if Donald Trump pulled out of it. I think, to be honest, all that really happened, as far as I can tell, was an interchange of views, and the business they got started talking at all. But 2015, Donald Trump is on record as saying how he thought it was a hopeless deal. I can't see that as the roadmap. Rather, it's going to be directly how far Iran is prepared to make concessions to take the Americans off their back. I don't think 2015 is going to be their roadmap.
And of course, President Trump is a man in a hurry, isn't he? He said he wants a deal quickly. I mean, could that end up being some sort of a political mistake? Because, I mean, the longer it takes to get any deal, it could end up starting to look like a failure, couldn't it? Or is it too soon to say that?
Well, it's a bit early to say that, but you're quite right in general principles. The point is that Donald Trump has made a point of making these off-the-cuff remarks about how he can solve everything in a twinkling of an eye. As I recall, he did mention the Ukrainian-Russian war could be over in a day. Well, that hasn't fully worked out, has it? And likewise, the fact he's in a hurry with the Iran deal, that's not going to happen quickly. In any case, from Iran's point of view, the longer they can hold out and stall the negotiations, the better from one point of view. Because to be quite honest, the moment they go ahead and sign, that's the moment they drop out of the international scene. And so therefore, in a sense, they're not looking for a quick deal. America is, of course. A neutralized Iran is what Israel wants and what it or Ukraine would want. And so therefore, to that extent, America wants the quick deal, Iran doesn't.
Indeed, and of course, significantly, Iran and the US are just talking to each other, whereas with the previous agreement, the talks were happening with the Europeans, Russia, and China. So there were lots of different opinions and mediators. So with the actors absent from this round of talks, I mean, that might suggest that it'll be faster, and that perhaps is a good sign in terms of how quickly they might reach agreement.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, isn't it? Because when you come down to it, which is better? Having all the international community on your side about an agreement, which is what Obama and indeed all presidents have done now for decades, or Trump's view that Europe is irrelevant, he doesn't want the Russians involved or the Chinese, though they can obviously have their say that with Iran. And which is the more effective, which is the better? Well, technically, if he does it by himself, it will be a faster deal, as you point out. But in terms of monitoring, in terms of international support, then obviously he won't necessarily have this. At the very least, Russia might be unhappy, as will China. And the EU itself has signaled that it's going to monitor these talks to see if they uphold European interests. And so therefore, although he has direct talks, other people have their say. And if they do not support this agreement, it will weaken it. That is the problem with his approach. Whether this will work out or not, it remains to be seen. It's still, please remember, very early on his presidency, he's still full of the vigor and his plans that he had initially to work, in effect, America first, America by itself, doing it all. And we've yet to see how it will work out. But what is quite clear, other nations will have their say, and if it does not acquire international support, the agreement may not hold for that reason.
On that note, I want to thank you very much indeed. Dr. Marek Laskiewicz is the International Affairs Analyst. He was talking to me on the line there from London.